Well, good morning, everyone. Time to get started. We have several of our regular class attendees out today, but we're glad you're here. And we are happy for all of you who are with us online and those of you who will be joining us later on demand on YouTube. We're glad to have all of you. I'm sure it will not come as a surprise to you to know that the very first book that was ever digitized was what? The Bible, of course. Back in 1971, a man by the name of Michael Hart sat down and typed the entire Bible into digital files. That's before the internet. It'd be another 20 years before the advent of the WWW, the World Wide Web, at which point the internet became accessible to commoners like you and me, and then the Bible was already sitting there, ready for worldwide distribution. There's an app, it's called the Bible app. You've heard me talk about it before. It's on your phone, it's free. It's the YouVersion Bible, but if you look in your app store, you'll just see a picture of a Bible and it'll say Holy Bible on it. That app is now in the Guinness Book of World Records as the single app with the greatest number of streaming translations of any book in history in the world. It has now been translated into more than 3,000 languages. 3,000 versions, more than 2,000 languages. Of course, there's many versions in English. They're all on the app. They're all free. All you have to do is download it. It has now been downloaded more than 990 million times. And if you don't have it, I recommend it. I use it daily as part of my morning devotional. It's got a verse of the day, and there's a little short video of somebody giving a devotional on that verse, and then there's a little short write-up on that, and then there's a guided prayer. Very well done, very easy to use, and I find it very, very helpful. Well, I'm going to spend just a little bit more time, and I'll try not to get on a kick on this, but I have a little bit more information on the subject of evolution, and then we'll get back into the text for today. As you're aware, in the theory of abiogenesis, the evolutionists contend that everything, all living matter, came from dead material. Back when I was in high school, the idea was spontaneous generation, and that's kind of been debunked now. There's a different theory that's primarily held, and I realize I'm speaking in broad strokes. There's variations on all of this, so if you've heard something a little bit different, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying this is kind of the mainstream, if you will, of evolutionary theory as I understand it today. And it's the idea that all of life arose from one single cell, which came into being from dead matter. It takes amino acid and RNA in the presence of protein to begin the process, and then somehow or another, miraculously, there has to be the DNA molecule introduced into that soup, into that mix, and then that DNA is the smallest existent thing that can create the reproducibility. And of course, the idea of life is the ability to reproduce. So that's kind of the theory as it's held as to how living matter came from dead material billions of years ago and over millions and millions of years of time. And different evolutionists have different ideas of where that might have occurred, whether it was in the ocean or whether it was in a swamp or wherever it was. But anyway, that's kind of the theory in a nutshell. The definition of life for an evolutionary scientist includes several things, but these are the core things. It has to be an organization. It has to be made up of cells. Cells are what reproduce themselves. It has to have metabolism. It has to be able to use and transform energy in some way or another. It has to have homeostasis. It has to be able to maintain an internal stability. It has to have continuity. It has to be able to respond to stimuli. If you touch it, it's going to respond. Or if something interacts with it, it will have a response. And of course, the one that is at the core of all of it, it has to be able to reproduce itself. If it can't reproduce itself, it's not life. Now, there are other things too, but those are the core things. To achieve this in a one-cell life form, there are a ton more of these, and there are one-cell life forms that are also very helpful. Some of those that make up yogurt and some of the probiotics that you'd be familiar with. In terms of evolution, I think it's interesting that as far as I'm able to determine, we have no two-cell life forms. And we have no three-cell life forms. It would seem logical to me that if this were an evolutionary process, you would go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3. Now we do have some 4-cell life forms. Those are primarily algae. In order to have a one-cell life form like E. coli or any of these others, you have to have a cell wall, cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleid containing DNA, ribosomes, plasmids, flagella, and pili, or pili, however you want to say it. I've seen it pronounced both ways. So a one-cell living organism is not very simple. And you have to have all of that in combination at the same time to have a life form. So I don't know, maybe 1 billion years isn't quite long enough. We might need to extend that a little bit longer. The very simplest free-living animals, and free-living, we mean something that can exist outside of a host. It's not a parasite. Trichoplex, it has no organs, no nerves, no brain. It is a flat living pancake, is what it's called by biologists. It reproduces by splitting itself in half. It doesn't lay eggs or give live birth. It just splits itself in half. And yet, that simplest of all free-living animals, that is able to live outside of a host, unlike bacteria and the other one-cell things, it requires 5,000 cells, minimum, at about 3 millimeter wide, and it's the simplest thing we have, and yet 5,000 cells, 5,000 of those one cells combined in a specific way to make it a living being. It gets more complex. Humans, on the other side, you and me, have something like 40 trillion cells in our bodies. We have between 200 and 400 distinct kinds of cells. That shows you how complex it is. Scientists can't even agree on how many distinct cells make up you. I mean, from 200 to 400, that's a pretty good margin of error. And yet that's the biological estimation today. Just some of those cells, and these are just a few of the 2 or 3 or 400, the stem cells, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and so forth, all the way down to the sex cells. So we've come a long way from that one cell living form to the 500 cell living form outside of a host to a human being with 40 trillion cells. To a creationist, that is just you and to me who believe in intelligent design, all of this that we've already talked about, that's the simple part. That's the easy part, comparatively speaking. Because what also defines life for us are things like consciousness. You are self-aware, something the rest of the animal world is not. You have a morality, a sense of what is right and what is wrong. You have self-reflection. It's called conscience. You have relationality. You have a covenantal relationship with people, whether it's your parents or your spouse or your children or your business or your church, whatever it is. This is part of what it means to be a living person. You have, of course, the ability to choose. You have free moral agency, which distinguishes you from all other life forms. You have the innate need to worship a greater power. This is irrefutable. I don't care where you live in this world. I don't care what generation you lived in, how prehistoric you are. The Homo sapien, the human, has always exhibited a need to worship something greater than himself. It might be an idol. It might be a tree. It might be the sun or the moon. But there is within us that innate need, desire, absolute necessity to worship something greater than ourselves. And I think that's true of every atheist as well. Science has absolutely no satisfactory explanation for any of these, how they could possibly evolve into where they are today. There's nothing evolutionary about any of these, and yet they all exist in ways that are measurable and that are irrefutable. Evolution has a tall mountain to climb. On this last point here, these things that make up human life that are not subject to evolution. I had one of the AI programs create a picture for me illustrating that, and I loved the conclusion that Copilot had. Even if science maps the mechanics, if you want to believe in evolution, even if science maps the mechanics, it cannot explain the ache for transcendency. That ache is not a glitch, it is a homing signal. I love that. We have a homing signal built into us that cannot come evolutionarily, if that's a word. It's built into us. We have a longing for something better, something after this life, a homing signal, a longing for God, a longing for home. And I don't know how the evolutionist ever explains that, or rationalizes that, or materializes that. Any thoughts?
What you said on the screen is what people really want to hear, or else they will, if they don't hear it, they will, well, miss it.
Thank you.
And that's all I'm going to say.
And John wanted to say something, I think.
Go ahead, John.
I mean, for what he just said, is that without your sales, that will never happen. But what you said about Jesus being crucified last week, it got me right here.
Good.
And because he took the punishment, not us. So,
Yes.
so he done on Friday, Saturday. On the third day, he rose.
Yeah.
He lives forever.
Yeah.
That's all what I have to say.
And that's where we're going. Good lead in.
Yes, sir.
So on to the crucifixion. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. And at that particular moment, we believe, the chronology is not absolute, but it makes sense. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They do not know what they're doing." And we talked about that at some length in the week or two past. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God?" He said, "Since we are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." And that's where we left off last week. I mentioned last week that the song "Criminal on the Cross" had created a real angst among many in the churches of Christ, because the criminal was invited into paradise without having been baptized. And David made a few comments on that, which is kind of the thing that we've traditionally said about that, is that, well, he lived under the Mosaic dispensation, not under the Christian dispensation. And he probably was baptized many times. As you know, he was likely a Jew because Romans didn't crucify Roman citizens. And he had probably been brought up in a Jewish observant family, likely, being there in Jerusalem or there in Israel. And as you know, the Jewish people practice baptism routinely and regularly. It's called they went into what we call a baptistry. They call it a mikveh, and there they were immersed for ceremonial cleansing. None of that had anything to do with being baptized in the name of Jesus. I could spend a lot of time talking about baptism, and I would probably just be misunderstood and create angst. But the bottom line is Jesus is God, and God can do anything He wants to. He can save anybody He wants to for any reason He wants to. He doesn't need my permission. I can't hardly even talk about baptism without creating anxiety, because it's become such a hot button for churches of Christ. And I have a little concern about it, because I think that maybe we have made it something that is not. This is what I know. I know Jesus modeled baptism. Jesus commanded baptism. All of the apostles modeled baptism, taught it, and baptized people. That makes it sound pretty important, and I believe that. We have used it as a division between us and the rest of the Christian world, primarily over, I'm going to say, semantics. Our mantra has been, baptism is essential to salvation, right? Baptism is essential to salvation. If you are not baptized, you cannot be saved. None of us believes that. You don't believe that. If you believed that, then we would baptize our babies like the Catholics do. The Catholics believe that. They believe baptism is a sacrament. A sacrament is something that has within itself efficacy. It performs the work itself. And so when a child is born, as soon as they can, they baptize it. Not really, they sprinkle it and call it baptism. We don't do that. We say, well, baptism has to be something that you choose to do, and though, therefore, you're not required to be baptized until what? Age of accountability, right? Okay, open up your calendar and give me a date. What's the date? When do you become at an age of accountability? Well, if you're a good Jewish boy, they've got a calendar date. When you become a man, they call that the age of 13. Still do today. And on your 13th birthday, you have a bar mitzvah. And it's a big deal. I've been in Israel and seen bar mitzvahs. They are big deals. And that ushers you into manhood. Now, there are limits on that, but technically you become a man. So is that the age of accountability? Is it the same for everyone? Does every man and woman reach an age of accountability emotionally, mentally, on the same day, their 13th birthday? Now, if Jesus is our model, what's the age of accountability? 30 years, right? He was approximately 30 years when he was baptized. So we get real upset with the Baptists because they have this doctrine that says we're saved by grace through faith, and baptism is a response to that faith. Now, if they had the same respect for baptism that we do, they would put baptism in their name. oh, wait a minute, they do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have been so involved in creating a pattern that we have allowed that pattern itself to become the driving force. And it has separated us in fellowship from a lot of the rest of the Christian world. And some aspects of that pattern are pretty hard to defend. Does that make baptism unnecessary, unessential, or unimportant? Absolutely not. And I think my bigger question would be not is it essential, but if you refuse it, why? Why would you ever refuse it? And that for me is the bigger issue. Well, I don't know if I've explained myself well, but it doesn't bother me that the thief went to paradise. I'll give the floor to anybody who wants to rebut that, and I won't argue with you. All right. So here's another question. Jesus said, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Where did they go? They went to paradise, right? Where'd they go? Well, that's a matter of a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion. And we're not going to answer it today. We can give some examples of different things that different people think, but we're certainly not going to be dogmatic about it. So where did they go? Paradise, some believe that paradise is a way of saying they went to be in the presence of God. Many scholars interpret paradise as synonymous with heaven, the dwelling place of God and the righteous. And this view suggests that Jesus and the thief entered into conscious communication with God immediately after death. Paul kind of supports this idea a little bit in 2 Corinthians 12:4, where he equates paradise. He said, I went to paradise. He called it the third heaven. And then in Philippians 1:23, he says he longs to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Now, this is probably not the theory that I grew up with, but I've kind of come to lean toward this. I grew up with the theory that paradise is Abraham's bosom, and of course this is Jesus' parable or story or recalling. We even debate whether it was a parable or not, of the rich man and Lazarus, where they went to the Hadean world, the world of the dead, and there was a separation. They were divided by a gulf, and the poor man was in Abraham's bosom, and the rich man was in a place called Hades, a place of torment. So in this idea, which was very popular in early Judaism and also among the early church fathers of Christianity, they saw paradise as a compartment of Sheol or Hades, the abode of the dead, a place where the righteous awaited resurrection. Jesus may have descended to this realm to proclaim victory and liberate the faithful. Peter has this strange statement in 1 Peter 3:19 about Jesus going and ministering to the dead saints. And there's also reference in Ephesians 4:9 from Paul. And this kind of aligns with the idea that Jesus descended into the lower parts of the earth before his resurrection. Back before we had flannel graphs, we had to use whatever we could come up with for visual aids. I still remember vividly a bed sheet that I had that I put all of that parable or story of the rich man and Lazarus on it so that I could explain to everybody exactly what happens when you die. And I use that as my whole basis for my understanding of it. And so that's another theory. This is what Scripture says about Jesus' journey. He said, Jesus died and was buried and then rose on the third day. After his resurrection, he ascended to heaven and sat at the right hand of God. Between death and resurrection, according to Peter, he may have preached to the spirits in prison. So where did he go? Any thoughts? Anybody willing to stick your neck out? Hades, I heard Hades and I heard heaven. Anybody, any other takers? Usually, and this didn't happen in my youth, but usually when I go to a funeral now and listen, and this is in churches of Christ, just in the ones I happen to be associated with, but when we go to a funeral, we express the idea that the Christian who has died in the Lord is with Jesus. That's what you hear, right? Usually. That would go back to our first idea, that paradise is a place where we are in communion with the other departed Christians and with the angels and with Jesus. I don't know if that's true, but I hope it is. And that's kind of what I would believe today. Now, it's not the final eternal abode of the soul, because we still have the great white throne scene yet to go. We have that judgment day that's coming. We've already been judged in the sense that we have been separated. The goats and the sheep have been separated. Wherever that is, whatever that is. But there's still a time, if we understand Revelation at all, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And then we will enter into whatever that eternal existence is. We've already entered into eternity, but there seems to be an intermediate level there. And if you remember back from our lengthy discussion about the near-death experiences, all of those bore that idea out. They frequently had an experience with dead loved ones. They frequently had an experience with a great light, which they interpreted as Jesus, but they also came to a barrier, and that barrier might look differently to different people. And at that point, they couldn't go beyond that. And so it just kind of makes sense to me. And I would not be dogmatic about this at all, but it kind of makes sense to me that Jesus went to a place where there was recognition, where there was companionship and community and the presence of God. But I'll let you come to your own conclusion. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Now, we know that the women were at the cross. We know that the men, with the exception of John, had backed away. They were not there, apparently. We're a little bit confused about exactly who the women were, and this doesn't matter at all. The confusion just comes from the event being recorded by different writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they have slightly different ways of expressing it. Maybe they even have slightly different remembrances. So not sure exactly who the women were. We obviously know that absolutely Mary Magdalene was there. We absolutely know that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there. Some of these others, we're not sure exactly how many and who they were. There were 3 or 4. Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Salome is mentioned by Mark. Joanna is mentioned by Luke. And then Luke and Matthew both also says there were other women. So we just don't know exactly who they were. We know that the women were there, and that's really all that's important. There's certainly a great deal of theological, symbolical significance to that. The fearlessness of the women. These women stayed when others fled. They were present at the cross. They were present at the burial. They knew where the tomb was. They were present at the tomb. They were present at the resurrection. They were witnesses in a culture where women's testimony was often dismissed. The Gospels boldly present them as the first evangelists. Mary Magdalene is often referred to as the apostle to the apostles, and she was. Symbolism, their journey from mourning to proclamation mirrors the movement from death to life and from despair into hope. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, that would be John, standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home. We read that in the English translation, and to our cultural sensitive ears, addressing Mary as woman sounds a little jarring, maybe. Why didn't he say mother? And we could argue about that, why he did. But in the culture in which this was spoken, that was not at all by any means disrespectful or disparative. It was certainly should not be interpreted that way at all. In the Jewish culture, the oldest son, which Jesus, of course, was, had a duty to care for his widowed mother, and Jesus honors this obligation. Why he didn't delegate to one of his brothers or sisters, I have no idea. But he didn't. Of course, you realize that at this point in Jesus' life, as far as I know, none of his brothers were believers. They're going to be, but they're not yet. Symbolically, Jesus is forming a new family, one not of blood, but by faith and by love. And this would be representative of the family of faith that will come as a result of his resurrection. It's a kind of a hinge moment between Father, forgive them, and it is finished. It's a divine redemption and human relationship meeting together at the cross, coming together in this very poignant action of looking at his mother and saying, "Mother, I want you to be well cared for, and I'm entrusting you to my dear friend and disciple, John." Same word he used for the woman, for his mother, when she came to him in Cana at the wedding. You remember that? She came up to him and said, "Hey, they run out of wine. What are you going to do about it?" And he said, "Woman, my time's not yet come." Some key takeaways from this particular utterance on the cross. We see certainly his tenderness, his compassion in the very midst of excruciating suffering and pain. We see a demonstration of his command. This was the first command with promise, you remember? Honor your father and mother. This is the first command with promise, that you may be well, but you may live long on the earth. So he honors his mother in this critical moment. So we mentioned it's the creation of a new spiritual family. Here's a family bound together not by blood, but by common faith. John and Mary, now family. We see Mary's ongoing role in the sacred community. And certainly we see a model for Christian responsibility. I asked one of the AI programs for a memorial about this particular event, and this is what I got. Beneath the timbered sky where blood and mercy mingle, a sun suspended between heaven and earth speaks not to kings nor to crowds, but to two hearts broken open by love. Woman, behold your son, not command, but consecration. Not farewell, but formation. A new family born in the shadow of death. John the Beloved received not just a mother, but the memory of miracles, the ache of incarnation, the womb that bore the word. Mary, the pierced one, received not just a son, but the church in seed form. Faithful, trembling, standing still. Beautifully done. And the cross, no longer just a place of execution, becomes a hearth where suffering births commune. So we too stand in that twilight where grief and grace entwine and hear the echo. Behold one another. Take each other home. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. Well, I think this is probably a pretty good transition point for us. So we're going to pick up here, Lord willing, next week as the darkness invades the area and we're getting close to the end of his time on the cross. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with my tirades when I go off script. And don't go tell anybody that I don't think baptism's important, okay? Have a wonderful, God bless week.